as a mathematician, I have the feeling the zero is staring at me in the face. In the middle of the painting, it is there, and it's saying, hello, I am zero. Infinity is somewhere around. My first impression is that I'm walking a little bit to the cosmos. Although the work is called atomic, I have more the feeling I'm looking at planets. It's like the universe. So the artist is looking at a miniature level of atoms, but is drawing it out to a cosmic level. Also, the artworks are trying to express nothingness. It's outer space, there's nothing there, there's only the zero, nothing else. But as a mathematician, it still feels like I'm looking to the two-dimensional space with the zero in the middle, spreading out, infinity somewhere out of reach. The contrast between zero and infinity that the artist was trying to express. And so there you see the relationship between zero and infinity, because if you divide by zero, you get infinity, which is not inside the domain of numbers. And then you could say, well, what I do is I can take infinity and I take it into the real numbers and add it. It's also a real number. This is actually the projective plane. And that's especially what I see with these physical spheres. I have the feeling a little bit like the projective plane. And then also if you do that, then zero is nicely at the bottom, infinity is nicely at the top. So it also shows the kind of contrast there are, and at the same time the relationship between zero and infinity. Take a sheet of paper and now start folding it over an apple, so to speak. The mathematician can fold it nicely over the apple, but since it spreads out to infinity, you can get higher and higher and higher and higher, but you never get to this closing point. You go from a non-compact space to a compact space, and that doesn't fit. But you can make it fit by saying, I put the infinity on top. I just close it up by an extra element, and then you get a projective plane. Zero and infinity are basically two sides of the same coin, because they're basically each other's twin brothers. Yeah? They have the same arithmetic properties. Zero is easily forgotten, and you should never forget it. I think what this artwork is expressing is, don't forget me, I am zero, I'm here.
Okay, so we have a bit of a different setting this time because unfortunately Jennifer couldn't make it today. So I will try to provide a bit of context for her work myself. But in this case, we have one Fokkink who reacted to the work. Actually, also not here in this room, but online. One, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great,
Hopefully.
welcome. So great you could make it. So let me immediately get started with my first question. And that is, if I'm not fully mistaken, Maria and Wenda had first asked you to actually comment on the work of Jan Robert or to react to it, but you really insisted to engage with Jennifer's work. So why that?
Actually, I didn't understand it in that way, but it's very well possible that I was supposed to comment on Jan Robert's artworks. But I really liked the way that zero was presented in Jennifer T's work, the kind of abstraction that she was making, and so it appealed to me.
Okay, so you think you would have seen this close relation to zero in her work also if you wouldn't have come across it in this exhibition context?
No, I think it was really that it was explained, so I looked at the explanations, and this gave me kind of context. Although I was expecting more atomic artworks, and when I looked at it, I also expressed it, it felt more like cosmos to me. But that's also kind of nice, because on the one hand, Jennifer T is having this contrast between zero and infinity, And on the other side, she has this contrast between the atomic level that she's trying to express and the cosmic level that me as a viewer is more the impression.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. So maybe as Jennifer cannot be here, we can give a little bit more background also on her work. So she is an artist with a very diverse body of work. Many of you will probably know another work of hers because it's actually shown in the metro station of Amsterdam Centraal. It's a huge work that is actually a photographic reproduction of a collage that is made from tulip petals, and it's called Navigating the River of the World, where she is referring to actually a ceremonial textile used in Sumatra. I'm just saying that this is of course not what we are discussing here, but it really shows how she's interested in making kind of knowledge systems resonate across time and space. So bringing different cultures, knowledge systems together also from the past, and also different scales. And maybe that's also something you were already referring to, one, that it's this specific work, the Atom series, is about both like the atom and space, so the very small and the very big. What is also interesting, and I was already alluding to this, that we have several works here that also like have references to earlier works in the history of art, because in this work Jennifer T. engages with a Swedish painter from the early 20th century, Hilma af Klint, and maybe we can show one of her drawings by Hilma af Klint, her aquarelle drawings, because it really shows how Jennifer T. took her works as a kind of starting point to translate the idea of that really pioneering abstract painter of the 1920s, and that's really also something that I think we have to take into account, because we are also talking here about the relation to the sciences and about innovation or ideas in the sciences that are somehow reflected upon by artists. And af Klimt was really very early in acknowledging what was happening in physics at the time, which was, of course, a very interesting times within physics, also with all these discoveries around atoms in the early 20th century. And so she had created these drawings, but actually knew that they were so much ahead of their time that she said they shouldn't be published only until after 20 years after her death. So actually she only became known even in the 1980s. I think that's quite interesting how now 100 years later, Jennifer T. is going back to these works and transferring their aesthetics into 3 dimensions as a kind of honoring this early artist who was already engaging with scientific discoveries in a way, but also very much restaging them in a different way. And also, as an example, she uses photographs of enlightened matches. So it's really a mix between scientific model, constructivist art exhibition, and so a very broad association, also bringing together of these different knowledge systems, which is typical for her. So to get back to you, one, sorry for like this kind of lengthy explanation in between. You state several times then in your engagement with the work that as a mathematician, I do read it this and that way. So do you really think that your professional background, your discipline, made you read the work in a very specific way?
In part, yes, because as a mathematician, I've looked very often, for instance, at the projective plane, which what I explained in the movie is a sphere. And so when I see this object, this sphere, it immediately casts me back to this kind of geometrical object I have seen as a mathematician. Also partly because if I sum up my own research in just a few sentences, I'm studying computer systems. Say if you fly a plane, you want to be certain that the software in the plane is correct. But then you have to reason about it as a mathematical object. And in these mathematical objects are zeros and ones, etc. So you have to also make a very precise, abstract representation of that. And in the sense, to go back to the artwork, I could also say that Jennifer T is also trying to do this, but as an artist. So she's trying to make an abstract representation of something very concrete, namely 0, infinity, the natural numbers. And so in that sense, it also resonates with me.
So can you imagine using this work in one of your lectures to explain the concept of infinity to your students?
Yes, I think I could. So also when I give a lecture, I have to explain how you very precisely specify the natural numbers in a different way than you're used to at high school. And I could also imagine then showing this artwork not to really explain the workings of it, but a lecture is also a little bit theater. Especially I'm lecturing to 650 students. That's more theater than lecturing in a sense. And this artwork could really help to bring alive this kind of lecture.
Yeah, in any case, you in your appearance in the film, I think you helped us very much also with your gestures to somehow translate some of the concepts you were alluding to us or to your viewers. So I found that really interesting, and also, yeah, I learned a lot from it. So are there questions from the audience, Sam?
No.
No, there are no questions from the audience. So they might have found it illuminating enough, or is there something coming in?
We just come in. Can you, Professor Fokkink, can you please tell us more about between divinity and it just the end of the question was just pulled by the person posting the question. Sorry.
So we are really live.
Yeah, we're really live.
The proof that we are. So I think Maria is also trying to get the question right now.
If I could only read faster.
No, we have time. Just take your time.
No, it isn't. It isn't here.
It isn't there.
Oh wait. Can you
See, it's
please
about
tell
visibility
us,
and invisibility.
Yeah, now wait. I'm copying it so we can just read it in our own pace. Can you please tell us more about the relation between dividing and the 0 and infinity? Dividing by 0 and infinity.
Did you get that question, Van?
Yes, I get it, and I can tell a bit more.
Great.
So when you go to primary school, you're always taught don't divide by 0 because it gives infinity basically. In Dutch, it said delen door 0 is flauwekul. And actually, it turns out that you can divide by 0, and you can actually give it a value that makes sense. Namely, you can define 1 divided by 0 is 0. This is counterintuitive, but it turns out it mathematically works just fine. So you can make a mathematical framework that works just as we use it, where 1 divided by 0 is equal to 0. Yeah, and that also shows the kind of relationship between 0 and infinity again, because 1 divided by 0 is infinity. But you can also define it is 0. Also in the movie, I say that 0 and infinity have very much the same properties. So they're kind of twin brothers or twin sisters. And that is also the reason why you can define 1 divided by 0 to be 0, and everything still works fine. It's amazing.
Wow, thank you so much. Well, I now, of course, would want to come back to the work in question. In how far does this then relate to atoms, and in how far does it relate to the cosmos? I know that we will also move to that topic with the next film and the next discussion. But do you have anything concluding to say about that one before we move to the next film?
My personal interpretation, now I really step away as a scientist, is, in a sense, Jennifer T is expressing that on the minuscule level of atoms, things very much look like the planetary level of the cosmos. So we have these kernels of atoms, of molecules, and we have electrons circling around them. It's almost like the cosmos. And so the artwork for me is trying to say, at a very miniature level, physics is very similar to the cosmic level.
Okay, I would say that's a great concluding sentence, and maybe we can come back to it with the next discussion. For now, thank you very much for joining us, even it from remotely. And
pleasure.
bye-bye, one. And we will move to the next.